How to build a mind so strong it terrifies people. Nietzsche. Have you ever become acutely aware of a subtle shift in the atmosphere around you? A palpable change that occurs precisely when you begin to change, truly fundamentally change. The people you thought knew you, perhaps even cherished you, suddenly begin to exude a quiet discomfort. They won't voice it openly, of course. That would be too direct, too confrontational. Instead, they'll skillfully disguise it, perhaps with forced jokes that fall flat, unsolicited advice, masked as genuine concern. Are you sure you're okay? Or that heavy, awkward silence that descends whenever you dare to speak about something deeper, something that deviates from the comfortable established script of your shared reality? But peel back the layers of social nicety. Look beneath the surface pleasantries, and what's truly unfolding is starkly simple. Your mental evolution threatens their meticulously constructed comfort zone. And let's be brutally honest, no one enjoys being forcibly confronted with their own complacency, their own quiet stagnation. Perhaps you are navigating this very terrain right now, feeling the ground shift beneath your feet. You've started to think differently, challenging assumptions you once passively accepted. You've begun to act differently, aligning your choices more closely with a newfound inner conviction. Maybe you've even dared to question the very foundations of beliefs you once held, sacred truths you accepted without a flicker of doubt. And suddenly, abruptly, the familiar landscape feels alien. You find yourself increasingly alone, profoundly misunderstood, perhaps even subtly judged by those who once seemed like allies. What no one likely told you, the uncomfortable truth that Friedrich Nietzsche grasped with more penetrating clarity than perhaps any other thinker, is that this very alienation, this unsettling friction, is the inescapable price of forging a truly strong mind. We're not talking about mere intellectual sharpness or resilience here. We're talking about cultivating a strength so profound, so intensely real, so undeniably authentic, that it inherently makes others uncomfortable. It subtly scares them. Without uttering a single accusatory word, your very presence, your quiet transformation becomes a stark mirror, inadvertently exposing the underlying weakness, the comfortable inertia of those who continue to live their lives on autopilot, bound by convention and fear. But why does this phenomenon occur with such predictable regularity? Because a mind that has achieved genuine power, the power of independent thought, self-determined values, and unwavering authenticity, poses an intrinsic threat to the pervasive force of collective mediocrity. Nietzsche was unequivocally clear on this point. The moment you make the conscious decision to think for yourself, to actively create your own hierarchy of values, rather than passively inheriting them, and to decisively abandon the comforting but ultimately hollow illusion of ready-made truths handed down by society, tradition, or authority. In that very moment, you become dangerous. Dangerous to the established system that thrives on conformity. Dangerous to the comfort of others who rely on predictability. And most profoundly dangerous to the former version of yourself, the one who was content to remain safely within the herd. Consider this video not merely as information, but as a call, a direct challenge thrown down before you. It is not crafted for those who reside comfortably within their established routines, nor for those seeking easy answers or superficial affirmations. This message is forged specifically for you, the individual who feels the suffocating weight of being a hostage to your own insecurities, who senses the tremors of an impending internal rupture, a breaking point, and who stands poised, ready, perhaps even desperate, to build something utterly impervious to external assault. Something no one can destroy, a mind that no one can manipulate. A mind that in its unwavering integrity and refusal to bend terrifies those who are accustomed to wielding influence through manipulation and the exploitation of weakness. So if you feel an inner resonance, a readiness to embark upon this arduous path, a path often marked by profound loneliness, demanding toughness, yet promising absolute transformation, Then stay, because the insights Nietzsche offers will undoubtedly confront you, challenge your most cherished beliefs, and perhaps even dismantle parts of yourself you thought were immutable. But within that very confrontation lies the potential for liberation. And after engaging with these ideas, truly engaging with them, you will likely never perceive yourself or the world in the same way again. Nietzsche was far more than a mere philosopher cataloging abstract ideas. He was a surgeon of the human soul, an intellectual explorer possessing the rare courage to gaze unflinchingly into the abyss of existence, and not only to face its darkness, but to actively dive into its chaotic depths. And it is precisely within that abyss, within that swirling inner chaos that most people desperately avoid, that he unearthed the very source of authentic enduring strength. Because for Nietzsche, profound human transformation does not occur amidst the tranquility of peace, the predictability of stability, or the superficiality of imposed order. It is forged in the crucible of pain. It is sculpted through the experience of the fall. It is born from the very heart of chaos. He famously wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." This is not merely a poetic metaphor, it is a profound psychological diagnosis. It signifies that if your ambition is to construct a mind that is truly unshakable, impervious to the corrosive forces of doubt and external pressure, you must first relinquish the childish, naive notion that such strength can be acquired through fleeting comfort, cheap motivational platitudes, or the hollow repetition of positive affirmations. No, authentic strength, the kind that endures, is born in the precise moments when you confront suffering head-on, without flinching, without seeking escape. It begins to take root when you cease pleading for life to become easier, and instead start demanding of yourself that you become stronger. Reflect honestly upon the periods of your most significant personal growth. Was it during times when everything flowed smoothly, when life felt effortless? Or was it more likely during those harrowing periods when you felt utterly shattered, profoundly lost, completely directionless, forced by circumstance to painstakingly rebuild yourself, piece by painful piece, using only the raw materials of your own resilience and will? Nietzsche believed that suffering was not some unfortunate cosmic error, a flaw in the fabric of existence, but rather its primary, indispensable driving force. He did not seek to romanticize pain or wallow in misery. Rather, he approached it with the unflinching gaze of a master craftsman, viewing it as a potent tool for shaping and tempering the human spirit. And if you can consciously transform your relationship with pain, with failure, with the often terrifying prospect of profound loneliness, seeing them not as enemies to be vanquished, but as demanding teachers offering invaluable lessons, you begin to forge something exceptionally rare within yourself. An indomitable spirit, a will that refuses to be broken. And it is precisely at this juncture, as you learn to navigate and even harness the power inherent in adversity, that the world around you begins to be disturbed by your very presence. Because while the vast majority desperately flee from any semblance of chaos, seeking refuge in predictability and conformity, you will be learning to walk confidently within it, extracting wisdom from its turbulence. While others fervently beg for a return to a comfortable, often illusory sense of normality, you will be engaged in the audacious act of creating greatness out of the very raw materials of struggle. However, this profound transformation necessitates a brutal, often painful break with everything you have likely been taught about the nature of strength. Being truly strong has nothing to do with plastering on a perpetual artificial smile. It is not about maintaining a facade of stoic, emotionless control, suppressing your authentic feelings beneath a veneer of invulnerability. Being genuinely strong in the Nietzschean sense means possessing the capacity to endure the seemingly unbearable, to walk through the fires of adversity, and to emerge on the other side, not diminished but tempered, hardened, perhaps even paradoxically more dangerous. Dangerous to complacency, dangerous to falsehood, dangerous to anything that seeks to limit your potential. But Nietzsche, ever the astute psychologist, knew that chaos left unchecked and unintegrated is not enough. You can be utterly destroyed by it, consumed by its disorienting power, if you lack a solid inner center, a psychological anchor amidst the storm. And that is precisely why, in the next crucial stage of our exploration, we will delve into arguably the most decisive and challenging moment in Nietzschean philosophy, the moment he famously declares the death of God, and in doing so places the full, unyielding weight of existential responsibility squarely upon your shoulders. Because when there is no longer an external sky to look up to for guidance or salvation, it is from within the depths of your own being that an entire universe of meaning and value needs to be born. When Nietzsche proclaimed, "God is dead," he was not engaging in a triumphant celebration of atheism, nor was he simply making a theological statement. He was issuing a profound and deeply unsettling warning, a warning whose full implications many still struggle to comprehend today. What Nietzsche metaphorically killed with this provocative declaration was not necessarily a specific divine figure residing in the heavens. He killed the illusion, the pervasive, comforting illusion that there exists some higher external authority meticulously orchestrating events, taking care of everything behind the scenes. The illusion that there is a preordained cosmic plan, a ready-made meaning imprinted onto existence, a ultimate purpose graciously bestowed upon us by some entity outside of ourselves. The death of God, in its philosophical essence, signifies the end of all excuses. And that realization is for many fundamentally frightening, because up until that conceptual death, it was relatively easy to outsource the ultimate responsibility for the trajectory and meaning of your own life. It was deeply comforting to cling to the belief that everything happens for a predetermined reason, that personal suffering is merely a small part of a larger benevolent divine plan, that there exists some ultimate transcendent good that will retroactively justify all the pain and struggle in the end. Nietzsche, with philosophical violence, rips this comforting veil away. He forces you to look directly into the stark face of existence and declares unequivocally, "You are alone." There is no pre-packaged meaning waiting to be discovered. The universe offers no inherent purpose. Now you are the creator. And it is precisely at this daunting precipice, this moment of profound existential vertigo, that the true construction of a genuinely powerful mind must begin. Why? Because the vast majority of people psychologically collapse when confronted with the raw realization of their ultimate aloneness in the face of cosmic indifference and inherent chaos. Without a divine manual, without celestial guarantees, with no one ultimately to blame for their circumstances but themselves, they crumble under the weight of absolute freedom. But those rare individuals who possess the inner courage to face this stark reality without disintegrating, without immediately scrambling for a new dogma or external authority to cling to, they begin the arduous but ultimately empowering process of forging an unshakable consciousness, a resilience built not on external props, but on internal fortitude. With the metaphorical death of God, Nietzsche forcefully pushes you into the abyss of radical freedom. This freedom is terrifying precisely because it is absolute. You are no longer obligated to follow externally imposed commandments. You are now tasked with the far more demanding challenge of creating your own values. You are no longer expected to passively obey. You are challenged to actively surpass yourself, to continually strive beyond your current limitations. This marks the birth of a brutal, uncompromising autonomy, and inevitably along with this radical freedom comes its inseparable twin, unbearable weight. Everything now depends solely on you. There is no more cosmic absolution for your failures, no guaranteed divine salvation awaiting you. The stark choice becomes brutally clear. Either you actively build yourself, forging meaning and strength from within, or you inevitably sink under the pressure of unmediated existence. But herein lies the profound secret. the paradoxical twist that unlocks the door to immense power, this very freedom that initially frightens you, this radical responsibility that seems overwhelming, is simultaneously the greatest potential source of power you can possibly possess. When you truly internalize the understanding that no external force, divine or otherwise, is coming to rescue you, something primal and potent awakens within your core. A fire ignites a fierce will to survive and thrive that compels you to rise again even when metaphorically bleeding, that forces you to think critically for yourself, to feel authentically for yourself, and to act decisively. Not because some external authority has deemed it right, but because you have consciously decided it is necessary and true for you. It is precisely in this radical rupture with all forms of existential crutches, these comforting illusions that shield us from the harsh realities of existence, that Nietzsche prepares the fertile ground for something even more grandiose, more revolutionary, the emergence of a fundamentally new way of being, a new archetype of human potential. This is a type of human being who refuses to live according to the blindly followed rules of the herd, who feels no intrinsic need for external approval or societal permission to exist authentically. This is a being who courageously creates their own morality, derived from their own lived experience and deepest convictions, who relentlessly surpasses their own perceived limits, and who lives life not as a passive recipient, but as an active creator. This is a being whose very existence inherently frightens the weak, the complacent, the conformist, precisely because it forces them through sheer contrast to glimpse themselves as they truly are, stripped bare of their comforting illusions. This transformative being has a name. Nietzsche called it the Übermensch, the overman, the self-surpasser. And it is about this challenging yet ultimately inspiring figure that we will now speak. Because if your genuine aspiration is to build a mind so profoundly strong that no external force can break it, you must first understand what it truly means and what it truly takes to strive towards becoming this figure who lives above the constraints of convention, guided solely by their own cultivated will to power. Let us now dive into the heart of this transformative ideal. Nietzsche harbored no faith in the slow, passive, almost imperceptible evolution of humanity towards some vaguely defined higher state. His philosophy championed rupture, radical transformation, the often necessary process of creative destruction, clearing away the debris of outdated values and limiting beliefs to make space for something new and vital to emerge. And it is from this foundational belief in radical self-overcoming that he conceived the challenging yet aspirational idea of the Übermensch, the overman. It is crucial to immediately dispel any simplistic interpretations. The Übermensch is not some comic book superhero endowed with mystical powers or supernatural abilities, nor is it simply an intellectually superior individual. The Übermensch, in Nietzsche's conception, represents a state of being, an aspirational goal for humanity, a being who has consciously and arduously overcome everything that typically binds and limits the ordinary individual. The paralyzing weight of guilt, the ingrained habit of blind obedience, the suffocating pressures of herd morality, the desperate, often subconscious need for constant external acceptance and validation. The Übermensch does not waste energy seeking to be accepted by the masses. They do not humbly ask for permission to exist authentically or to pursue their own unique path. Instead, they actively create their own internal laws, their own hierarchy of values, forged in the crucible of their own experience and critical reflection, and they live resolutely by these self-determined principles, even if, and often precisely because, doing so places them in direct opposition to the prevailing norms and expectations of the entire world. And this unwavering commitment to self-created values is exactly why the mind of the Übermensch becomes virtually unbreakable. Its foundation is not precariously built upon the shifting sands of others' expectations or the fleeting whims of public opinion. It does not require external approval or validation to affirm its own worth. It is profoundly self-sufficient, drawing its sustenance and driving force from its own internal wellspring, the will to power. This concept, often misinterpreted as a crude desire for domination over others, is more accurately understood in Nietzsche's context as the deep intrinsic impulse to grow, to overcome limitations, to master oneself, and ultimately to shape reality, both internal and external, in accordance with one's own highest values and creative potential. This represents the central revolutionary point. The Übermensch does not passively adapt themselves to fit the pre-existing mold of the world. They actively impose meaning onto the world through their actions, their creations, and their very way of being. They do not prioritize the pursuit of mere comfort or security. They relentlessly seek greatness, striving for self-mastery and the full realization of their potential. They do not timidly ask, "Is this action permitted by societal norms?" Instead, they pose the far more demanding and self-reflective question, "Is this action worthy of me?" And this fundamental shift in perspective from seeing oneself as a passive servant of external forces to embracing the role of an active creator changes absolutely everything. The way you think, the way you act, the very way you feel and experience the world undergoes a complete and irreversible transformation. But herein lies the formidable challenge, the unavoidable difficulty. Becoming this kind of self-determining, value-creating being demands immense sacrifice. You will inevitably have to metaphorically kill those deeply ingrained parts of yourself that still desperately beg for external approval, that crave the comforting reassurance of belonging to the herd. You will be forced to confront the often intense pain of not fitting in, of being fundamentally misunderstood. You will have to bear the solitary weight of constructing your own identity almost entirely from scratch, without the comforting guarantees of tradition, without the encouraging pats on the back from society, without the validating applause from the audience of your peers. And the stark reality is that most people simply cannot handle this demanding process. They abandon the path before they have even truly begun, quickly retreating back to the perceived safety and familiarity of ready-made beliefs, rigid dogmas, and pre-established rules that someone else conveniently wrote for them. The path towards the Übermensch is inherently, inescapably lonely. Nietzsche himself knew this intimately. He lived much of his productive life on the margins of society, profoundly misunderstood, often dismissed as mad, increasingly isolated from the very world he was so desperately trying to liberate from its self-imposed intellectual and spiritual shackles. But it was precisely within that profound isolation, that chosen solitude, that he discovered the bedrock of his own intellectual freedom. And this is the critical insight you must grasp. The stronger your mind becomes, the more authentically you begin to live according to your own self-determined values, the further you will inevitably drift from the comforting conformity of the masses. The higher you intellectually and spiritually ascend, the more your very presence will subtly disturb those who remain tethered to the ground of conventional thought. The construction of the Übermensch within oneself is arguably the most brutal, yet ultimately the most transformative process any individual can undertake. It requires you to systematically dismantle and destroy everything within your psyche that is not authentically yours, everything that has been insidiously imposed upon you by a potentially sick culture, by a society that often rewards blind obedience and actively punishes genuine authenticity. And only after this arduous process of deconstruction, of clearing away the debris of societal conditioning, can you truly begin to build something new, something authentic, something enduring. But this profound construction does not occur amidst the distracting noise and validation-seeking dynamics of the crowd. It happens in the fertile ground of silence, in intentional withdrawal, in the deep, often challenging solitude that inevitably separates the genuinely strong from the perpetually weak. And that is exactly why in the next crucial section we will dive into the most frequently neglected, yet arguably the most powerful and indispensable aspect of this entire transformative journey, the profound solitude of the strong. Because the unvarnished truth is that to cultivate a mind that is truly unshakable, you will first have to learn to walk resolutely, unyieldingly alone, and precious few are genuinely prepared for that demanding reality, are you? If there is one fundamental, often unspoken truth about the arduous path towards cultivating genuine mental strength, it is this: the stronger, the more self-possessed and authentic you become, the more profoundly lonely you are likely to feel. And crucially, this is not typically because you consciously choose to isolate yourself out of misanthropy or arrogance. It is rather because the world, in its comfortable familiarity with mediocrity and conformity, increasingly does not know what to do with you. Your refusal to play by the established rules, your commitment to independent thought, your very presence disrupts the predictable social equilibrium. Nietzsche spoke with stark clarity about this phenomenon. The free spirit, the individual who courageously breaks away from the comforting embrace of common morality, who refuses to passively accept easy, pre-packaged truths, who insists on thinking critically for themselves. This individual inevitably, almost gravitationally, distances themselves from the herd. And that distancing, that gradual separation from the familiar warmth of collective belonging, often hurts. It can trigger primal fears of rejection and isolation. But Nietzsche argued that this pain, while real, is fundamentally necessary because authentic growth, like the growth of a mighty tree, requires ample space. Space to stretch, space to breathe, space to develop strong roots, unconstrained by external pressures. And you simply cannot achieve that kind of expansive growth while remaining tightly tethered to the limiting expectations and judgments of others. Most people, whether they consciously realize it or not, live their lives confined within an invisible herd, a psychological enclosure where every thought is subtly policed by the fear of social disapproval, every action meticulously measured against the anticipated reactions of others. You have likely become accustomed to the comfortable rhythm of walking in a group, thinking like the group, deriving a sense of security simply from the physical presence of others around you, regardless of the quality of those connections. But the path Nietzsche proposes is the radical opposite. He metaphorically tears you away from that suffocating, albeit familiar, comfort, and forcefully throws you into the vast, challenging expanse of the existential desert. In that desert, there are no readily available rounds of applause to validate your efforts, no superficial words of praise to soothe your insecurities, no pre-written guidebooks offering easy answers. There is only you confronting the stark reality of your own doubts, your unresolved traumas, your deepest fears, and the persistent, nagging desire to simply give up and retreat back to the familiar comfort of the known. And it is precisely here, in this crucible of solitude, that the real test of your inner strength begins. Because what will most people do when faced with this stark isolation and the discomfort of self-confrontation? They will inevitably run back. They will desperately seek refuge once more behind the familiar masks of social conformity. They will pretend they don't feel the inner dissonance, pretend they don't think the challenging thoughts, pretend they don't see the uncomfortable truths about themselves and the world. But you, if you harbor the genuine, unwavering desire to become someone whose inner core no external force can break, you will have to stay. You will have to consciously choose to endure the profound silence of that desert. The silence that relentlessly strips away all pretense and reveals who you truly are beneath the layers of social conditioning. Nietzsche powerfully stated, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of possessing yourself." That is the absolute essence of this demanding journey, the possession of oneself. This is arguably the rarest yet simultaneously the most powerful and liberating achievement any human being can attain. Because when you truly possess yourself, your thoughts, your values, your actions, your emotional responses, no one else can exert ultimate control over you. No one else dictates your intrinsic worth, and consequently, no one else possesses the power to fundamentally bring you down. However, this profound self-possession inevitably comes intertwined with the often heavy weight of loneliness. You will lose people along the way, particularly those whose connection to you was based on your conformity or their ability to manipulate you. You will be profoundly misunderstood, your motivations misinterpreted, your intentions questioned. You will likely hear the familiar labels hurled your way: arrogant, strange, distant. They will actively try, consciously or unconsciously, to pull you back into the comfortable mold you have dared to break. They may even call you crazy, cold, or insensitive for refusing to participate in their emotional games or cater to their expectations. But recognize this resistance for what it is. It is the inevitable price of refusing to be domesticated. It is the cost of liberating yourself from the addictive need for constant external applause. It is the inherent consequence of ceasing to live as a mere mirror, reflecting back the needs and desires of others. And here lies the raw, unvarnished truth. If you cannot learn to withstand, even embrace a significant degree of loneliness, you are fundamentally not ready for true freedom. Because all genuine freedom, whether intellectual, emotional, or spiritual, necessitates a degree of abandonment. The abandonment of emotional crutches, the abandonment of comforting but ultimately false illusions, the abandonment of utilitarian friendships based on mutual convenience rather than authentic connection. This is why Nietzsche viewed solitude not as a punishment or a deficiency, but as a profound privilege, a sacred battlefield, where the authentic self, long suppressed by the demands of the herd, finally has the necessary space and silence to emerge unfettered and powerful. But this liberated mind, this elevated spirit forged in the fires of solitude, does not merely learn to walk alone. It also begins to perceive the world with a newfound clarity, seeing through the illusions and mediocrities that entrap the masses. And inevitably, with this heightened perception comes the second unavoidable effect: the direct confrontation with mediocrity. Because when you genuinely start to embody strength, authenticity, and independent thought, the pervasive force of collective mediocrity instinctively feels your presence, and it invariably reacts. And that reactive resistance is precisely what we will dissect next: the inherent danger posed by collective mediocrity. Because the world rarely pursues those who conform, it actively targets those who dare to stand out. Nietzsche did not reserve his most potent philosophical critique for overt tyrants, authoritarian leaders, or explicitly declared oppressors. What he truly feared and relentlessly denounced with fiery philosophical fury was the far more insidious, subtle, and corrosive power of collective mediocrity. This is that invisible yet pervasive system operating within society that subtly works to keep everyone leveled down, that implicitly punishes those who dare to think differently or strive for excellence, that cynically rewards blind obedience, and that skillfully disguises cowardice and conformity as virtues like humility or teamwork. True tyranny, according to Nietzsche's penetrating analysis, does not primarily descend from above, from the decrees of a single ruler. It more often emanates from the sides, from the relentless pressure of the crowd, the herd that implicitly demands you remain small, average, non-threatening, so that they do not feel compelled to confront their own lack of growth or ambition. And this is precisely the dynamic that unfolds when you begin to genuinely stand out, when your mind sharpens through critical thought, when your spirit firms through self-discipline, when your very presence becomes increasingly uncomfortable for those accustomed to the status quo. You begin to disturb the comfortable equilibrium, not because you are intentionally doing something wrong or aggressive, but simply because you are doing something rare. You are breaking the established mold, deviating from the expected path. And society, particularly in its collective mediocre aspect, inherently hates those who dare to break its cherished molds. Collective mediocrity simply cannot abide individual brilliance or genuine strength, because that very brilliance, that undeniable strength, serves as an unwelcome mirror, inadvertently exposing the pervasive darkness, the quiet desperation, the unfulfilled potential that often characterizes ordinary conformist life. Nietzsche termed the underlying value system that perpetuates this dynamic the slave morality. This is a morality cunningly constructed, often unconsciously, by those who, feeling unable or unwilling to achieve genuine greatness themselves, decided instead to invert traditional values. They skillfully transformed strength into perceived arrogance, healthy ambition into supposed selfishness, courageous independence into apparent coldness, and through this subtle yet pervasive inversion, they created a moral system that ostensibly protects the weak, but in reality primarily serves to condemn and undermine the strong. But make no mistake, Nietzsche warned this condemnation does not arise from genuine compassion for the downtrodden. It stems primarily from resentment, the deep-seated envy and bitterness felt by the mediocre towards those who possess qualities they lack and are unwilling to cultivate. Because ultimately the weak in this context do not truly desire to be saved or elevated. They often secretly desire for the strong to be brought down, neutralized, and destroyed so that their own mediocrity feels less exposed. This is why the moment you begin to truly liberate yourself from the shackles of conformity and mediocrity, the attacks often commence. Sometimes these attacks are direct and overt, but more often they are subtle and insidious, conveyed through dismissive looks, pregnant silences, biting irony, or passive-aggressive remarks. But the underlying message, however veiled, remains brutally clear. Go back to the group. Your difference is making us feel small, and you simply, by striving to be authentically yourself, unintentionally become a target. Nietzsche possessed a profound understanding that most people live their lives in a state of paralyzing conformity, an existence fundamentally shaped by fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of standing out, compounded by externally imposed guilt and the ingrained habit of obedience. Consequently, anyone who dares to question this pervasive state of being, anyone who embodies an alternative, is immediately perceived as a dangerous threat to the established order. But do not be fooled into thinking that mediocrity attacks with overt force or intellectual rigor. Its primary weapons are far more insidious. It attacks with the sheer weight of numbers, with the comforting illusion of consensus, with the relentless power of repetition. It will relentlessly try to make you doubt your own perceptions, your own sanity. It will subtly manipulate you into thinking that you are fundamentally wrong, flawed, or arrogant, simply for not fitting neatly into its predefined boxes. It will deploy the full arsenal of social resources, from invoking shame and guilt to employing tactics of social exclusion, all in an attempt to make you lower your head, abandon your unique path, and retreat back into the safety of the herd. And it is precisely at this critical juncture, under the sustained pressure of collective disapproval, that many potentially strong individuals ultimately give up. They simply cannot bear the psychological weight of being perpetually perceived as the strange one, the difficult one, the arrogant one. But Nietzsche would offer you a different, more empowering name: necessary. Because while the world endlessly revolves around recycled ideas, manufactured desires, and comfortable, often misleading truths, it is precisely the strong, independent individual who introduces the necessary discomfort, the challenging perspective, the disruptive energy required for something genuinely new, vital, and transformative to be born. Your difference, your refusal to conform, is not a flaw. It is the very spark of potential transformation. But inevitably, it is also the target of fierce resistance. Being strong, thinking freely, living autonomously. All of these are in a sense inherent acts of war against the pervasive forces of collective mediocrity. And like any war, it requires conscious preparation, strategic awareness, and effective weapons. Not physical weapons, of course, but potent mental weapons, resilience, self-knowledge, unwavering conviction, and the courage to stand alone. And that is exactly what we will address now in the final culminating part of our exploration. Because there is undoubtedly a very high cost associated with developing a mind so strong that it frightens those entrenched in mediocrity. But there is also a profound reward, an inner power and freedom that no one can ever take away from you. In this concluding section, you will come to fully understand both the price and the ultimate power of becoming truly unbreakable. You have made it this far. That singular fact already sets you profoundly apart from the vast majority. Most people would have clicked away from this exploration at the very first provocation, the first instance where their comfortable beliefs were challenged. They would have instinctively run away at the first flicker of internal discomfort. They would have decisively turned it off the moment they realized this is not the kind of content designed to passively stroke the ego or offer easy platitudes. This has been from the outset a direct call to action, a summons intended only for those who are genuinely ready to relinquish the comfortable illusion, to discard the security blankets of conformity, and to face the often harsh realities of existence with their eyes wide open. Because understand this with absolute clarity, building a mind so intrinsically strong that its very presence becomes feared by the forces of mediocrity is not merely a casual choice. It is a profound renunciation. You will lose things. You will inevitably lose friendships that were fundamentally based on superficiality, on maintaining comfortable appearances rather than engaging with authentic truth. You will likely lose opportunities that inherently require submission, that demand you compromise your core values for external gain. You will even lose the simple, often deceptive ability to be easily content with mediocrity, with good enough, because your standards for yourself and for life will have irrevocably risen. But in exchange for these losses, you gain something utterly priceless, something that cannot be bought or bestowed, only earned through arduous inner work. Integrity, clarity, presence. You will begin to notice with increasing sharpness that most people navigate their lives in a state of quiet slumber to their own potential, and that your burgeoning lucidity, your refusal to participate in the collective dream, is inherently frightening to them. You will observe that your quiet firmness, your unwillingness to be easily swayed or manipulated, makes others tremble, exposing their own lack of inner conviction. You will come to understand that your authentic absence from superficial gatherings can often resonate more loudly, carry more weight than the noisy, empty presence of many who simply fill space. This formidable strength does not originate from external sources. It is not taught in simplistic self-help books, nor is it magically acquired through the chanting of ready-made phrases or the repetition of hollow affirmations. It is painstakingly dug from the deepest strata of the soul, forged in the profound silence of difficult nights, tempered through the countless small, unseen choices made when no one is watching. It is the hard-won result of a relentless internal war waged between the person you were conditioned to be and the authentic, powerful individual you are striving to become. And understand this crucial point, this war, this process of self-overcoming has no definitive end. Because the truly strong in the Nietzschean sense are not those who have achieved some static state of final victory. They are those who possess the unwavering courage to continue the fight, to relentlessly strive for growth and self-mastery, even when they could arguably afford to rest, even when external pressures tempt them to stop. Nietzsche never sought to create passive followers or disciples who would blindly parrot his ideas. His aim was far more ambitious, far more radical, He wanted to provoke internal earthquakes to shatter the foundations of limiting beliefs and societal conditioning within the individual. He wanted you to stop crawling on your knees begging for external approval. He wanted you to cease desperately seeking pre-packaged meaning from external systems and authorities. He wanted you to stop searching outside yourself for that which can only be painstakingly built from within, constructed with your own metaphorical blood, sweat, and burgeoning awareness. He wanted you ultimately to become dangerous, not in a crudely violent or malicious sense, but dangerous in the sense of being rare, unique, unpredictable, and uncompromisingly authentic. So rare, in fact, that your mere existence, your quiet embodiment of self-mastery, forces others to inadvertently look in the mirror and confront the uncomfortable truths they have been diligently avoiding. And now, as we conclude this intense exploration, I want to invite you to take a concrete step, an action that will help solidify this process of claiming your own strength and voice. Write in the comments below a truth you are tired of hiding, an opinion you have been afraid to voice, a thought that makes you feel isolated, but that genuinely represents who you are striving to become. This act, however small it may seem, is a vital part of the journey. Claiming your unique voice, showing your authentic presence, and more than that, declaring both to yourself and symbolically to the world that you will no longer bend to the pressures of conformity. And if this video has touched something deep within you, if a spark of recognition or a surge of resolve has been awakened, don't stop here. The next video in this series is just as crucial, perhaps even more so, as it builds upon these foundational ideas. It continues this demanding yet ultimately liberating journey. And if you have made it this far, you already know deep down that you are not watching merely out of idle curiosity. You are here because something fundamental inside you has already begun to shift, to awaken, to demand more. So keep going. Persist on this path. You are not truly alone. You are simply ahead. And that, my dear fellow traveler, while potentially frightening to those still lagging behind, is also the very definition of being profoundly, exhilaratingly liberating.